Okay, great. Well, first off, we just want to welcome everyone for coming to our session today. Thank you very much. My name is Dennis Garcia. I'm an Assistant General Counsel for Microsoft. I'm based in Chicago. I lead Microsoft's legal support function to our U.S. Central Region Enterprise and Partner Group team. We're going to have a conversation today about compliant cloud computing. I will let my fellow panelists introduce themselves individually. Edward?
I'm Edward Efkeman. I'm at FedEx. I'm a Director of Compliance. We're within the legal department, so we have a compliance department, but it is within the legal department. My responsibility is somewhat outward-facing. Customers and data privacy, data protection is within my area of responsibility.
Hi, I'm Daryl Hobbs. I'm also at Microsoft. I support what's known as Microsoft's mid-market business. So I like to think of it, we have our top customers, and then our mid-market is everything else, about 6 million customers that we sell to. So it's a breadth business. I sell across almost every industry, so I see a lot of different things on a daily basis, and happy to be here.
My name is Jude Sounder. I work for the Army General Counsel. I'm an ethics attorney, and my portfolio includes financial disclosure and social media. I'm also the program manager for financial disclosure management. It's the main application that DoD uses for financial disclosure. Basically, all senior officials in DoD and actually government must disclose their assets and liabilities, so we can do a conflict analysis to make sure that there's no conflicts with the deals and work that they're doing. I'm also an Army Reservist, a major of the Army Reserve, and I do work around, I'm a JAG attorney also, and I do work around conflict minerals and other issues like that.
Well, great. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it. So in terms of a format today, we thought what we do is, recognizing that folks may have different degrees of understanding as to what cloud computing is all about, we wanted to take a step back and provide a basic overview of cloud computing, what I call a Cloud 101. So I'll provide a 10 to 12 minute overview of the cloud, if you will. And then we'll switch gears and we'll open it up to various questions to the panelists. And we want this to be highly participatory. So to the extent that folks have any questions, don't be shy in asking your questions. We're here to address any questions that you have. So feel free to chime in. So what I'm going to give is sort of a layperson's overview of the cloud. Of course, I'm a lawyer. I'm not an engineer, so I'm not going to get into the technical details per se. So this is going to be more of a cloud computing for compliance professionals. And I think a great place to start when you're thinking about the cloud is to realize that whether we like it or not, whether we realize it or not, we're all using the cloud each and every day as part of our personal lives, right? After all, many of us have been using web-hosted email since the late 1990s, right, to send messages to friends and family. I know when I started using web-hosted email, it was through an AOL.com account. I moved to a Yahoo account. And of course, now working at Microsoft, I have a Live.com account. But all of us are sending emails each and every day, and that is largely powered by cloud computing. So many of us have smartphones nowadays, right? I know I have a smartphone. I use my smartphone probably too much. A lot of that data, which is generated through our phones, is stored in the cloud. And of course, many of us are using social media each and every day. I'm a big fan of Facebook. I use LinkedIn. I'm a big fan of Twitter. Social media is largely powered by the cloud. So the cloud really isn't anything so new, and it's become more and more a ubiquitous part of our everyday lives. In terms of a definition of the cloud, like a lot of technologies, there's no one uniform definition of cloud computing. There's a variety of definitions, but the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is part of the Department of Commerce, and of course they're only a few blocks away, back in 2011, they put together a white paper with a pretty involved definition of cloud computing, which has become more of the de facto industry standard definition of cloud computing. I'm not going to cover that definition. It's a pretty involved and robust definition. If you want to look at the white paper, by all means, take a look at the citation on my slide. But I prefer this more straightforward and simpler definition of cloud computing, which I found in a legal ethics and cloud opinion from the state of Pennsylvania a few years ago. And in that opinion, they talked about how cloud computing is really a fancy way of saying stuff's not on your computer. And you may say, well, Dennis, that's really an oversimplification. But I think in many respects, this captures the essence of what the cloud is all about. Because the cloud is really all about this notion of off-premises remote computing. So when I joined Microsoft back in December of 2002, the primary way which we provided our solutions and our software was through software licenses so that our software could be downloaded and installed on our customers' servers and workstations and machines which were on their on-premises environment within the firewall of their companies. But the whole notion of moving to the cloud is that you'll get services and software on a remote basis by a third-party cloud services provider. So it's being provided remotely and off-premises. The cloud is also all about the data centers. A lot of folks think about the cloud as being something which is amorphous and touchy and feely, but it's really bricks and mortars at the end of the day. It's really all about these data centers. And of course, these data centers are massive, massive facilities. They're the size of football fields. They'll contain racks and racks of servers and computing equipment. And at Microsoft, of course, we have lots of data centers scattered throughout the world. We actually have over 100 data centers in over 40 different countries in the world. Last week, we announced that we're going to be having data centers effective 2018 in Africa, in South Africa, actually. And we're the first major cloud provider to have data centers in the African continent. So when you think about the cloud, it's really tangible. It's really powered by these massive data center facilities, which should also be highly secured environments. When you think about the cloud, generally speaking, the cloud is provided in three different forms, what I call the big three of the cloud. The first part of that big three is something known as software as a service, where in essence, software is provided to you through the internet. We think a great example of software as a service is Microsoft's Office 365 solution, where you can get anytime, anywhere access to Microsoft's Office suite of products just by having a connection to the internet. A second type of cloud computing is something known as infrastructure as a service, also really known as hardware as a service. A leading provider in this space is Amazon Web Services. Microsoft also has a competing solution known as Microsoft Azure. And the whole basis of infrastructure as a service is that you can buy on a subscription basis computing power, hardware power, server power. You can store your data with an infrastructure as a services provider. A final mode of cloud computing is something known as platform as a service. And this is generally geared to developers, people who are creating information technology such as web applications, mobile applications, and platform as a service provides you with a virtual sandbox where you can engage in development sorts of activities. Now, there's lots of benefits associated with moving to the cloud. One of the benefits we speak to with our customers is that we believe that you can save a lot of money by moving to the cloud, by moving away from an on-premises environment, because you no longer have to buy servers or rent servers. You don't have to power those servers up. You don't need to have space for those servers. You don't need to have somebody to maintain those servers. So there's lots of business, financial advantages by moving to the cloud. It's also highly scalable. So you can, if your business is very seasonal in nature, as an example, if you need more cloud services, you can ramp up or ramp down depending upon your need. We feel it also allows our customers to focus on their core business. So they really get out of information technology, let the experts handle that, and that they can better serve their customers. And assuming that you're working with a trusted cloud provider, a reliable cloud provider, there's also this perspective that you could probably be more secure in providing your data to a trusted cloud provider, and that they could do a better job at protecting that data versus what you can do on an on-premises environment. In fact, most cloud providers push out updates to their solutions and to their software. So we saw a few weeks ago with the WannaCry situation where various companies did not upgrade their Windows operating system. If you're working with a cloud services provider, those updates are pushed out automatically. Now, some folks have identified various concerns in moving to the cloud. Some folks believe that the act of providing their data and their customers' data and their partners' data to a third party can be inherently unstable and can cause maybe some security concerns. We hear that on occasion from some of our customers. There's this perspective that perhaps the larger cloud services providers could be viewed as a bigger target for potential cyber criminals and hackers. Sometimes when you're moving to the cloud, you may have to also migrate data to a cloud services provider. There could be time and effort and costs associated with that. So folks have also identified some potential concerns in moving to the cloud. But regardless, we have seen that over the last few years that the cloud marketplace has grown exponentially. Here's a survey done by the Forrester Research Group where they talk about how the cloud marketplace is going to be growing to almost $250 billion by 2020. And so it's become a big business, cloud computing. And because of that, there are a number of cloud services providers out there. It's become what I call sort of a crowded cloud provider marketplace. A lot of times, companies aren't sure which cloud provider they should select and choose. And so when I look at the marketplace, I view the marketplace really being in 4 categories. The first category are the traditional information technology providers who are providing cloud solutions, companies like my company, IBM and Oracle. Then there is this other category of providers who like to say they've been born in the cloud. I'm not sure what born in the cloud really means, but those providers are the Googles, the Amazons, the Salesforce.coms. There's also a third category of smaller cloud providers which are out there. Some of them make money, some of them don't. Some of them may be an acquisition for a target for an acquisition by another company. Then I think a fourth category are these providers who perhaps were really never in the information technology space, but they've re-engineered their business to get involved in cloud computing and offer cloud storage solutions. Examples of those companies are the phone companies, telephony companies, companies like AT&T and Verizon. But a key point, and one of the key takeaways, I think, from our discussion today, is if you're thinking about moving to the cloud, and lots of entities are and have already moved to the cloud, it's really important that you spend your time conducting some thoughtful due diligence and ensuring that you can trust your cloud provider. Something which our Microsoft President and Chief Legal Officer Brad Smith likes to say time and time again is that in these uncertain times when we've seen cyber issues, cyber attack issues, data loss issues, that companies will only use technology that they can truly trust. So make sure you're spending your time properly evaluating cloud services providers. So when I think of a possible framework which folks may want to use in evaluating potential cloud services providers, I think a key foundational element is this whole notion of compliance. You want to work with a cloud provider who hopefully can help enable you to meet your compliance needs. But there's also other key areas to really hone in on, such as security. What do they do to protect your data in the cloud? How about privacy and data control? What are they doing to ensuring that you continue to own your data, that you can get access to your data even though it's stored in a cloud provider's cloud? And also transparency. You want to work with a cloud provider who hopefully is very clear and truly transparent to you regarding their cloud services business practices and where your data is located in their cloud. So what we'll do now is change gears a little bit, and we'll have a conversation about the cloud. And again, we invite the audience to ask whatever questions that they may have. But let me throw out a first question. It's sort of a two-part question. Who are the key stakeholders that should be involved in deciding which cloud provider to use, and what should be the role of a compliance professional during the cloud provider evaluation stage? Edward, you may have some thoughts on that.
I do. It's good that is the first question, because Dennis, when you first asked me to be on a panel on cloud computing, my first thought was, wow, that's not my primary focus. I don't do cloud computing. But then when you start thinking about it, there's no one person in most corporations that's their focus. It's a team. It's a very varied team of people that you need to collect. And it's not just legal and InfoSec, the ones that first come to mind. It's not, you know, the InfoSec or IT say, based on cost savings and based on efficiency, here's what we want to do. And then the legal it's a binary go, no go. It's not like that, or it shouldn't be like that. There are a lot of other factors and considerations on moving to the cloud, and you need the entire team to do that. We focus on going to the business and figuring out what the use case is, what data is being proposed to put into the cloud, how it's going to be used, where it's going to be going. And then that really informs the entire decision. So maybe you want to narrow the type of data you're moving in. Maybe there is some data that's too sensitive for you to put into the cloud. Maybe there's others that you're not comfortable with that particular provider. Or there's a lot of different patterns and variations to go, but you need to have all those discussions right from the beginning. Gather all your team right from the beginning. And I think that's the second part is, what is the compliance professional, in my world, the privacy professional's role is to make sure all those people have input, make sure all the voices are heard, and make sure that each concern is addressed along the way.
Great. And just to highlight just a few points which you made, I think it's, and we see this with some of our customers, that they don't get the key folks and stakeholders involved early and often, and that's something which you really need to do. We've seen time and time again, some of our customers have signed our cloud computing contracts, but after they sign the contract, then they want to start using our solutions, so we get involved in sort of a second sales cycle, a second negotiation, because they haven't had key decision makers involved in the front end. So make sure you group those folks in very, very early and often. I think there is an interesting role for the compliance professional to play as sort of a quasi-quarterback to making sure that the right folks get involved.
Yeah, I would just say also from an efficiency standpoint, I mean, to your point, Dennis, oftentimes people will sign cloud contracts and the board of directors have no idea that, you know, things are actually in the cloud or that a contract has been signed. And you want to get everyone involved because oftentimes you'll have these really very valuable security briefings about the cloud, and ultimately the right people are not in the room. And so when it comes to legal, when it comes to procurement, the CMO, they've had no participation or no involvement or buy-in on this decision. So you find yourself doing it over and over again, trying to get the right people so that they will embrace, cloud services, essentially.
No doubt. And I would also make another point that you definitely want to get the right stakeholders involved, but be sensitive to maybe getting too many folks involved. Sometimes at Microsoft, we get involved in our cloud contract negotiations, and the customer will get 25, 30 folks involved. And, we can't tell a customer how many folks they should get involved. But I think focus in on the core stakeholders who can really provide value, who could be sort of nimble and sort of efficient in the process.
Dennis, I just want to add, so we have a very structured DoD acquisition process. So it's very structured. And every cloud service provider and cloud service offering must be certified by the Defense Information Service Agency. That being said, we spend $8.3 billion on IT just for the Army alone. So moving to the cloud, we're looking to reduce costs, but one thing I want to point out, it also harmonizes our security. So some of the security risks can be reduced by using the cloud since we don't have so many systems. The other thing I like to point out is we always do a cost-benefit analysis on the systems that we want to move to the cloud. Because in some cases, moving to the cloud won't save us money, actually. If it's still a one-off system, we may not gain efficiencies by moving to the cloud.
I see. Great points, great points. Any questions from the audience? Let's pause here for a second. Okay. So let's move on to another question. What are the key criteria that customers should consider when evaluating a cloud services provider?
Yeah, I'll jump in on this one. So it's the things that you had up there before. It's security, compliance, transparency, control. Not everything fits neatly into those buckets, but those things tend to be, again, the board of director and level involvement. So when you think about security, security is still a big issue. I think it really depends on the industry, quite frankly. I sell to, again, a broad base of customers, so security is a really big issue. But you have to think about it from the standpoint that your cloud providers, the big ones, it's a core competency, security. So they can do the patch management, the virus monitoring, the firewall, things like that. Whereas in a lot of smaller companies, it's very difficult and not cost effective to do that. When you start thinking about other things like data loss, I mean that's a big issue for people. But in a public cloud environment, it's very, very rare for that to happen simply because of the way the data is stored in the data centers, and we'll probably get to that in a little bit. In terms of compliance and control, that's another big issue for customers. And my advice to people is to do some research on your cloud provider. Make sure that they're using the data just to provide the service and nothing else. So there should be no targeting of ads, no data mining, things like that. I kind of like to look at it from a philosophy of that you should be almost in no worse position because the CSP should be, in a sense, a custodian. It's almost like a safe deposit box, if you will. You're putting that data in that safe deposit box. You control it. You should have all the legal benefits as if you had control of that data yourself. So if you think about that, what that looks like, an example would be government access, right? So does your CSP have in protocols, procedures, process that if government comes to request data, that they're going to notify you first? And if they can't notify you first, what's their procedure? Are they willing to contest it? Are they willing to take it to court? I mean, that's a big control issue. The compliance aspect of it is that, you can't comply if your standardized service that you're using does not comply. So all cloud providers should strive to meet, any regulation that applies to cloud providers. And that is a situation, too, where you need to look at the history of your cloud service provider. Where were they when ISO 27018 came out, 27001, Safe Harbor, model clauses? Did they comply with those regulations? And that'll give you sort of a backdrop as to their history and their core competencies and whether they take it seriously or not.
Yeah, two things I wanted to add. The one thing for DoD and Army that's very important is past performance. We always look at the past performance and how they performed in other contracts. And the other thing is the value-add services that they can add. One thing that's very important to us is migration support. So when we're moving that data from our existing system to the cloud, that support is very important to us and how they can plug in and help us with that migration.
Just a few follow-up points. For those of you who don't know what ISO 27018 is, that's a international standard regarding how a cloud services provider needs to protect data in the cloud. It was the first international cloud service certification compliance standard. Microsoft was the first major cloud provider to achieve certification with that standard. But make sure that your cloud services provider complies with that important standard. One thing which we've seen with some of our customers in terms of the due diligence and evaluation process is that oftentimes they will send us a detailed security questionnaire document. Sometimes they'll send us a request for proposal document asking us a variety of questions as to how we secure data in the cloud and what our practices and our protocols are. So that may be a practice which you want to consider. Yes, ma'am. So, thank you for the question. It's a great question. So the question is, at the end of the day, Microsoft talks about its practices and policies. Are they willing to step up to the plate, if you will, and to provide what I would call a proactive, hold harmless indemnity provision? It's a very good question. We see that from customers time and time again, and we're going to be talking about the allocation of risk. So at Microsoft, we have what we think are commercially reasonable limitational liability terms and conditions, whereby we are willing to protect up to 12 months of fees paid for the services. We don't technically have an indemnity provision built in our standard contracts. I know we're on videotape here, but I will say that depending upon the nature of the customer, the size of the deal, we have been willing to provide what we call a reimbursement of customer mitigation costs if there is a data loss security incident. But that reimbursement is always capped by whatever cap on limitation liability which we agree to. So it's not an unlimited stance vis-a-vis indemnity. And so we've spent a lot of time over the years, of course, benchmarking the standard contracts of our customers. So we think that, for the most part, our terms are very commercially reasonable. But I think that's part of the give and take of the negotiation process with a customer. But that's a terrific question. Thank you very much for it.
Let me add one more consideration that I really hadn't talked about before, and actually for the three of us probably doesn't matter as much. But I heard yesterday from a gentleman from the FBI, and he was talking about the potentiality of future ownership. So his example was Amazon Web Services, which might be a little bit example too far. But there are a lot of smaller cloud providers, a lot of startups that are, and his thought was if you go ahead and put your data with them, and then they get sold to somebody who's got a beneficial owner in China or North Korea or some other state which may not be as friendly to data privacy law, what's going to happen? And I don't know. It's only been 24 hours since I thought about it, but I'm trying to decide whether that's too paranoid or not. But maybe it's not. Maybe thinking ahead a little bit to how that provider is going to be, and what the likelihood is in a year or two of the stability of your data in that cloud provider. It's probably not a bad.
I think it's a fair point, and that's something which you should ask as part of the due diligence process to understand the makeup of the cloud services provider, what their reputation has been, do they make money or not, what's the likelihood of them being a target, what's their financial, how good are they doing financially, if they declare insolvency or bankruptcy, what happens to your data. Also, just sort of as a corollary point on the indemnity piece, there may be some smaller cloud services providers who are willing to indemnify you, and that's all well and good, but what does that indemnity really mean at the end of the day? So when you're thinking about indemnity, I would say to you that indemnity probably means more from a well-capitalized cloud services provider versus a smaller provider.
Yeah.
One thing I want to add is also, we talked about indemnity, but also the portability of the data. If all else fails, I think it's very important to have a contract clause that talks about the portability of that data and how it's going to be exported and what format that will be. So that's very important to us.
Yeah, and I would say for the indemnity standpoint as well, or duty to defend, there are things you should be in a sense made whole if you're utilizing the service and you're sued as a result of just using the service, right? And to your point for the FBI example, you still have a contract, you still have breach of contract remedies, you also have encryption, and as cloud services evolve, there's encryption where you bring your own key, essentially, where you have control of that data. So if you're using best industry practices with respect to encryption, there is some protection there, even in a cloud service.
Yes, sir.
So on this issue of portability of data, we took our procurement system to the cloud 3 years ago, reacted to the company's contract. There was nothing in there about portability, whether or not they go bankrupt or whether we decide to switch. So is there an industry standard? Is there standard terms or something that we should have been savvy to insist on or point to?
Well, a few thoughts, and I'll let others jump in, but I think you should always make sure that it's part of your contract, the cloud provider, that you always have access to your data, that you always very clear that you retain ownership to your data. I know at Microsoft, in the event that there's an end of our contract, we always provide the ability for our customers to get access to their data for a period of time, or they may want us to delete their data. And if they want us to delete the data, we're willing to do that too. So we give options, but I think that's an important consideration to include and to think about in your contract. You really need to be cognizant of the so-called exit strategy, if you will.
Right, and then one thing I'd add is the migration services. I think you need to have in that contract is like a period of time. If this relationship doesn't work out, that you have a period of time where they're going to help you migrate that data off that system, and then you specify the formats of that data is going to be. I think that should be in the contract.
Yeah, I think also, with GDPR coming out, there are going to be some provisions in there on data portability and migration of data. So if your cloud service provider provides services to people in Europe, then they're going to have to comply with GDPR, or if they have offices that are based in Europe, they'll have to comply with GDPR. I think it's almost impossible from a cloud contract standpoint to say, well, how much time is enough time to migrate data to the new service, right? Most cloud contracts will say 90 days. That's their responsibility, and that's a standardized service, keeping in mind that you have literally tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of customers, right? So you're standardizing that service. So what happens if it takes you longer than 90 days? And so that's something that you can talk about with your cloud service provider, but there should be a plan in place to migrate the data. And as long as you're paying for it, by the way, they have to maintain it. So even if the contract says 90 days, if you still have a valid contract and you're going month to month, for example, they're still providing you the service, and you could be planning to migrate that data as you move along. Just food for thought. So.
Just a point on the acronym GDPR. That stands for the General Data Protection Regulation. It's a new law which will come into effect about a year or so from now, and it's going to be if you have personal identifiable information of folks in the EU or companies in the EU, or if you do business in the EU, you're going to want to make sure you comply with this new law. It contains a number of different requirements from a legal perspective. I think there was a session yesterday on the GDPR, and if you don't comply with the GDPR, you stand to be responsible for up to, I believe, 4% of your revenues if you're in violation of the GDPR. So make sure that as you're moving to the cloud, give some thought as to how do you become GDPR ready. I'll just give one more plug if you don't mind for a second. Tomorrow, there's going to be a webcast with our Microsoft President and Chief Legal Officer Brad Smith and our Chief Privacy Officer Brendan Lynch, where they're going to talk about what Microsoft does from a GDPR perspective. It starts at 9 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow morning. I know all of us will be still here at Compliance Week, but you can still listen to it on demand as your schedule permits. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm coming at this from the GDPR perspective. And, we're trying to engage a lot of new SaaS services for security purposes. And I'm trying to make sure that we are GDPR compliant now, so I don't have to do it next year, and get the right privacy clauses in the contract, and try to get our Works Council approval for these sorts of new services. And every single provider I talk to acts like I'm the first one that's ever asked. And so the responsibility is falling on me to draft those clauses and to put together presentations and materials for Works Councils to convince them that this is a good idea. And I feel like it's not sustainable, and it can't be the right way, because I don't know anything about SaaS services. I'm not the best person to be doing this. And so I'm wondering, am I talking to the wrong people? How can this process go more smoothly? It feels like I must be doing something wrong.
Well, first of all, it's a great question, and I don't think you're doing anything wrong. I think you're asking the right questions at this point in time, because it's really important to gear up for GDPR, because it's a pretty involved law. At Microsoft, at our Microsoft Trust Center, we have a number of resources which you could take a look at, which provides some advice, some sort of rules of the road, if you will, as to how to become GDPR ready. At Microsoft also, we're the first major cloud services provider which is offering GDPR contract terms as part of our cloud contract. So also make sure that your cloud provider isn't just talking about GDPR, if you will, but they're willing to back it up in terms of actual commitments in their cloud contracts. I'll also say that we've been seeing more and more of our sophisticated customers asking about what are you doing vis-a-vis GDPR. So you're asking the absolute right questions. And I do think you're probably going to see more. At Microsoft, we like to feel that we sort of set the tone for the industry, if you will. I think you're going to see more and more cloud providers have a conversation and talking about what they're doing to comply with GDPR. But definitely ask those questions, drill down in more detail.
Yep.
Is there typically someone internally who has this in mind? We want our service to be used by this company, so we're going to help this company convince its Works Councils.
People within the cloud providers business, basically. We don't have folks who, I would say, directly would advocate on your behalf in front of those regulatory authorities. But, we have a bunch of lawyers and regulatory folks who constantly interact with these folks, and we've been getting our house in order to make sure that we're GDPR ready. So you want to, I think, work with a cloud provider who has resources available, which then you can show to these regulators to say, hey, we've selected this provider because they really know what they're doing in the area of GDPR readiness.
So I'm asking the same questions. I'm in the same boat as you.
It's like, why am I putting
No,
together a presentation on CrowdStrike? I don't know anything about CrowdStrike.
I do understand, and I have not found that person in any cloud providers. That one person that is like, oh yeah, here's here's the deck we used for the Works Council on our last client. I mean, we don't have that. But on Works Council, I will say it's not apples and oranges, but there are separate issues. And each company's Works Councils are, and actually each country's Works Council within that company do have different tolerances. So I do, from that side, I can understand why a Microsoft, or it doesn't say, here's our Works Council presentation, because it does differ. But you're right, you do need to ask those questions first of your HR. This gets back to our first point. Get with your HR and say, what are your Works Councils and you're going to be looking for? What sorts of information do I need to gather about this new solution, so that from the provider and from the business and from IT, so we can package it all and go to the Works Councils and say, here, this is what we plan on doing. But it's not an easy answer, especially if you're an American company and you're doing with a U.S. cloud provider. A lot of times you're going to hear from them, we don't have anything to do with GDPR. We don't want to deal with it. That's not the right answer, and they'll find that out in about 369 days. But it's evolving.
It's the answer for Army. All of our systems are domestic.
I'll give a plug. Microsoft.com/GDPR has a lot of materials on it. There's a whole industry popping up around this as well. They estimate it's about a $4 to $5 billion industry in terms of helping companies prepare for GDPR. So there are a lot of people out there who are doing this. Microsoft has a lot of partners who help our customers in this format as well. So there's stuff out there, but certainly willing to talk with you more about it if you have questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Been very helpful in going through our agreements and putting clauses in our agreements for the providers to need to comply with GDPR. So I would have no idea, but if you get a privacy expert, they should be up to speed with it.
I'm so surprised that when we're talking to such a big company that they haven't answered these questions.
So, yeah, and keep in mind too that it's a partnership with your cloud service provider on this as well. I mean, obviously the cloud service provider has a lot of things that it needs to do to make sure that it complies with GDPR, and it's a huge engineering commitment. I mean, very expensive to do. But on the flip side, you've also got a lot of things that you have to do as well. I mean, if you have loyalty programs, all kinds of things where you're collecting personal information, you've got to ensure that you're complying with GDPR also and how you collect that information. So it's not as simple as just dumping it in the cloud, problem solved. I mean, there's a lot of work to be done on both parties' end to make sure that you're successful.
So I'll just make one point about Microsoft. So to the extent, happy to talk more offline, but Microsoft stands ready to help you, navigate through those issues as needed. So, okay. Any other questions? Okay, well, let's move to another question.
I think we have one.
I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned earlier about that you're doing with accounting services
Yes.
there. So we're currently trying to use any data to how that service is. And it turns out that since it is a new country, new laws and
Well, we're transparent as to where our customers are, where their data is located in our cloud. So as an example, let's say you provision your what we call a tenant or a data center in North America or the U.S. We say that your data at rest will remain in the U.S. or North America. I'm assuming we will make similar commitments vis-a-vis Africa and maybe the Middle East and Africa region, if you will.
Yeah, I would just say that that's correct as I understand it, that we can keep, the way we engineer our services, we can keep your data in a particular region. I mean, there is some redundancy, so it's something that we can talk about with our technical specialists to ensure that you have data where you think it should be. The other thing that I would say is important for a CSP is to ensure that that wherever the data rests, the laws of that particular jurisdiction will apply to the data. And that might sound sort of counterintuitive, but you don't want some foreign government coming in and issuing a subpoena trying to get access to your data because it's, it's in the U.S. or some other place or whatever. So, again, look at your CSP's track record in defending that. I mean, are they willing to stand up? I can tell you, and this is not a plug for Microsoft, but we've sued the U.S. government over this. It's, right now it's, I guess, in the appeals court. We won the last round, but it may go higher depending on whether the government decides to appeal or not. But anyway, so.
But it's
Absolutely. It's all really important, for sure. And that's the other thing. It comes back to control, which there's a whole bunch of questions we probably will not have time to get to, but that's part of control and who has access and, is it logged, that kind of thing. And, the physical security aspect of the data while it resides with your CSP is extremely important as well. So when you have that conversation, I think that's an important aspect of the conversation to have. And how do they control the data? What's the physical control and who has access and how is that logged and third-party access, subcontractors, all kinds of things. I think those are discussions that you'll need to have.
Very good question. Okay, well, let's move on to another question. So what other trends do you guys see in the space of cloud computing?
So a big thing for Army and DoD is SAS, so we're service as a service. That is software as a service. That's a huge thing for us. And it looks like we can move many of our applications to the cloud using SAS. So that's especially around the office environment. So.
Yeah, I'd say for me the biggest trend seeing across various industries is just embracing of the cloud, right? So 3-4 years ago, a lot of companies would have never put sensitive workloads into the cloud. Not only are they doing that, but they're doing it in a public cloud format, taking advantage of the huge economies of scale. So I think, public cloud, there was a survey by LinkedIn, their information security community, which spans across 7 or 8 different industries. And this survey is about 2 years old, but 71% were either in the cloud or actively planning to go in the cloud. So I would say that, it's not only where you are today in terms of your planning, but where will you be in a year from now vis-a-vis your competitors? And if you're not in the cloud, is that going to put you or your company at a competitive disadvantage? So, I mean, those are the big things that I see. And it used to be number one conversation, security, security, security. Now the number one conversation is about privacy and control. And security is still important, don't get me wrong. It's still a big thing, but most people have done a lot of research now about cloud, and they feel a lot more comfortable about security. And I've heard a lot of CIOs say this, that, the fact of the matter is that, the major cloud providers can protect their data better than they can do it in-house themselves. And that, again, it's because of the monitoring. We spend over $1 billion a year just in security alone. So it's now a core competency of all of your major cloud providers.
I think the other thing is having your data in one cloud is you can do big data analysis. So when all your data is residing in one system, allows a mini big data analysis that wouldn't be available before. So it's a huge business analytic.
The other point I would just make before going to the question is that we've been seeing customers adopt what is known as a hybrid approach. There are some customers who don't want to go all in the cloud, and so they keep some of their data on premises, maybe some of the more sensitive data, and they move other workloads and data to a cloud. Yes, sir, you had a question.
I do, thank you. And I want to turn back to the indemnification issue, I could,
Sure.
As we're talking about data security. In our situation, we're actually taking our customer data and then we would be putting it on the cloud. So there's an expectation from our customer that we will be safeguarding that data. Yes. To the extent that the 12-month subscription cap exists, that's not cutting it with our customers. They want a more absolute commitment from us. How do you suggest we bridge the gap? Because I have seen over the last 5 or 8 years where the 12-month subscription value becomes the standard, but it's wholly inadequate in terms of the potential liability that we could expect. How do we bridge that gap?
Well, when we see that come up many times as part of our discussions with our customers. And I think at the end of the day, from my viewpoint, it's ultimately a business risk financial issue, right? Depending upon the economics of the deal, the nature of the customer, we may be willing to elevate that cap. but it's all really based upon the financial aspects of the deal. Daryl, you've seen this come up time and time again too.
I'll be honest with you. I mean, I very rarely see a deal not happen because of limitation of liability or because of indemnity. Normally, the parties are able to get to a point where they're both comfortable, and it takes a while to get there. I mean, many times there's security briefings, understanding, what the service is and how we store the data, how it's encrypted. I mean, so if the issue is data being stolen, some companies get more comfortable when they understand how we store the data, how it's encrypted, how your data is not going to reside on one box. It's going to be stored across the data center on many different servers. So, hypothetically, if a server were penetrated, not only is it encrypted, but it's only going to be a piece of your information. It doesn't answer your question. I think there's flexibility there among cloud providers, right? So, I've often heard, this cloud provider will take uncapped liability and that sort of thing. I would just tell you to read the fine print on those. It's not really true in what some cloud providers say about uncapped liability and what they're willing to provide. I think at the end of the day, there's no cloud provider that's willing to bet their entire company, because essentially it's not going to be one customer that's hit. It's going to be a multiple across hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of customers potentially. So there's got to be some reasonable cap on liability. What that is, I think you'll have to get comfortable with your cloud service provider. But there is, those are one of the things that, quite frankly, a cloud service provider can negotiate with you. There's certain things that, because of the way the service is engineered, I can't change even if I wanted to. But indemnity, limitation of liability, my commitment to you, or your cloud services provider's commitment to you, those are things that, quite frankly, I believe can be negotiated where you can get to a level of comfort.
Well, it's a risk analysis, right? And you have to look at the alternative. So I don't know what your situation is, but I mean, there's a lot of companies that are starting out and they don't have very sophisticated IT resources themselves. So while you might say, look, we want to go into the cloud, but we want protection, but from your customer standpoint and even from your board of directors standpoint, what's the alternative? If you were to maintain it inside, on premises, what protections are you affording there? I mean, what would be your exposure there? You might not be increasing your exposure dramatically to go into the cloud, either from a security standpoint or from a financial standpoint. So it's not a simple math. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
You talk about this cloud as a thing, right, as a unit, but really a cloud is hardware, software, interconnected pipes. What are the cloud providers doing to ensure that their component pieces comply with data protection requirements?
Well, I'll throw a possible answer there, and feel free to chime in. At Microsoft, we use a number of subcontractors as part of our provision of cloud services. We use these subcontractors because, quite frankly, it's a way for us to provide competitive costs associated with our cloud. But we take responsibility on behalf of those subcontractors. We put that into our contract that we're responsible on behalf of our subcontractors. We also notify you and tell you on our Microsoft Trust Center site who our subcontractors are, so you're aware of it. So we flow down a number of those terms and conditions which we're signing up to with our customer through our subcontract agreements with our subcontractors.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, just the question. So are you more concerned with ensuring that we're keeping up with rules and regulations with respect to our hardware, that it's best of breed? Or maybe I didn't understand the question fully. So if I could get you to drill down, I'm sorry about that.
No problem. I work a lot with component systems, right? That's my job is to go in and look at them and make sure that they meet the data protection requirements.
Sure.
But dealing in the digital world, right? It's a combination of a lot of different pieces glued together to make the cloud.
Gotcha. Okay.
What I want to know is what is the focus of the cloud service providers? What is their due diligence focus right now on ensuring that one of those components, all of those components meet data protection requirements? Is the focus just on the software? Is the focus on the hardware? Because we talk a lot about security and how impenetrable a network is. But do we also look at whether or not each component of that cloud system the hardware and the software meets the data protection requirements?
Yeah, I mean, so I would just say that we're building data centers around the world. Some of them we own outright, we construct, we build. Some of them are leased, but we stand behind our SLA. So we're looking at the entire system. We're ensuring that hardware specifically. I think we take our useful servers out of life every 2.5 to 3 years. They're shredded, broken into pieces, new servers replaced. So we try to ensure that we're using best of breed services, hardware. Again, there's penetration testing, all types of patching, things like that go on a daily basis to ensure that we're meeting our SLA requirements and that we stand behind our service. We say that we're going to comply with all laws. So it comes to any cloud service provider, not just Microsoft, but you want to make sure that they're putting these things into their SLAs, into their contract, and if not, then it's a breach. I mean, right? So you want to make sure that they have some skin in the game with respect to these things.
I'll just add a few other points too. It's my understanding that as part of our contract terms, we have a robust definition of Microsoft Online Services. So it's really the combination of our services which go into our cloud services, right? It's a combination of items, basically, if you will, and we stand behind all of our terms, stand behind that definition of Microsoft Online Services. I believe that it's part of the servers which we have in our data center environment. I think we design the blueprints, if you will, as to how these servers are supposed to be architected, if you will, and then we have our providers package their servers appropriately.
So one of the riskiest elements that we see and what we look out for is that human element. So the insider attack is the other thing that we're very much concerned about at DoD. So we have very strict requirements on security clearances on the people and the contractors that work on our system. So that's the other risk factor, is that human element.
Yep. Just another question, I know we touched upon this a little bit, is how about thoughts about third-party or law enforcement access to data issues? Any perspective on that?
Yeah, so I deal with that all the time. My system is financial disclosure management, and there's a formal protocol to request every senior leader in DoD, or actually in the government, needs to file what's called the Office of Government Ethics 278 form. And there's a formal process where that can be requested, and so we provide that data as requested. But we've also provided bulk data to researchers, anonymized data, so that they could do big data analysis on the data that's in our systems, actually, to kind of match the assets to see what DoD officials or what assets they hold in aggregate.
Great. Yeah. Any thoughts about that?
Other than making sure your CSP has a process in place with respect to government requests, and make sure that there's transparency around it, and make sure, for example, the results are published, so how many requests there have been, how many times your CSP has actually had to turn over data. Is there a built-in process? When I talked earlier about the safe deposit box analogy, our position is that you're in a better position than your CSP to decide what complies with a third-party request of data. So, our position is that we will always, and this is engineered in, we will always redirect any request for data to the owner of that data. And if we're not permitted to do that, we will contest it. And so, I would encourage you, whatever CSP that you look at, to make sure they have a process in place and make sure they have a demonstrated history of doing that. Have they ever sued the government with respect to this? Are they just saying, you can write anything in a contract, but do you or are you willing to stand behind it?
Yeah, as a customer, we absolutely expect that. If we're putting data and assets into the cloud, then we're looking at it like a safe deposit box too, and we expect the cloud provider to protect it and defend it against all requests as we would ourselves.
Great. And here's another question. I know we touched upon parts of this question earlier, but with regard to limitation liability and indemnity, but how much contract negotiation changes should a cloud provider be willing to entertain and or accommodate? In terms of sometimes we see with our customers a proverbial battle of the forms. Microsoft's got its standard cloud services contract. Sometimes our customers come back and they have a specialized exhibit with regard to their security protocols and practices. So, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have a comment. It just goes to the question over here about the GDPR and new. A lot of times you are not negotiating against your cloud service provider. You are negotiating with them to ensure that the contract that the two of you put together is going to be satisfactory to a regulator or to whoever looks at it later or to a works council. You know, sometimes there are some works councils, I'm thinking about Germany in particular, that can sometimes get so detailed they actually want to see contracts and they want to see the protections are in there. So you need that discussion with your cloud service provider is not necessarily adversarial. It's not, I want 2 years worth of fees instead of 1. It's not that sort of thing. It's what do we need to add to this contract so that the regulators, from a data privacy perspective, believe that we are both protecting the individual data that we put into it. So sometimes it takes a little getting used to from a negotiation standpoint. But if it's done right, it's not as painful as it could be.
Okay, great. Another question. Are there any third-party resources out there which you would encourage folks to take a look at? I'll just do a quick answer to that question. I think a great resource is this organization known as the Cloud Security Alliance. They're becoming more of a leading think tank in the area of cloud services, so check out their website and their resources. Another terrific organization is the International Association of Privacy Professionals, IAPP, and they've got some great information about data security, privacy, especially as it relates to the cloud. But any other resources?
Yeah, so for the DoD, there's the Defense Information Services Agency. All of our cloud requirements are laid there in the public domain, and I would say to the private sector, feel free to leverage what we have there. It's all available in the public domain.
Okay. Just maybe one last question I'll throw out there. So once your cloud contract is signed, how important is it to consider managing and monitoring your contract in this ever-changing environment?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, again, it's a partnership, right? So I think you have to do that. I mean, there's a whole industry that's sort of sprung up around that today. And, you know, to be honest with you, we're struggling to keep up with it because we're really trying to have some consistency around the process. So I can tell you what we do. We publish a lot of things. We publish the results of our audit. We publish the results of law enforcement requests. We try to get everything out as much as possible on our website so that our customers can look at it. Our challenge is when you have so many customers, how do you have a standardized process for them to evaluate the cloud service after the fact? And this industry that's sprung up around it, you know, you get these security questionnaires from existing customers, and they're all different. And so from a cost to sales perspective, it's extremely difficult to reply to every single security questionnaire. So we try to, you know, have a standardized response. For some customers, quite frankly, that's acceptable, and for some customers, it's not. So I'll be honest, for us, it's a real challenge right now, and how to do that, because our prior model, much like most of the old line companies, was to deliver software, and you sort of maintained it. Now we're doing that, and so there is that continuing partnership that you go through the life of the contract that you have today.
Yeah, I would just consider, really encourage you guys to, once you sign a cloud computing contract, actively manage and monitor that contract, especially with regard to the service level agreement SLA commitments. You want to make sure that you keep your cloud services provider honest in that area. So I think we're right up against time or so, but do any folks have any other questions? Okay, seeing that there's no other questions, we again really appreciate your attention and for joining our session today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.